Bobby Fischer. If you know anything at all about chess, you know that name. He was an absolute legend, a warrior at the board, a true artist, with the mind so brilliant it seemed almost alien. But his life story? Well, it's one of the most profound and frankly disturbing contradictions of the 20th century.
So these were supposedly his final words, the last thing he ever said. A man who spent decades pushing everyone and everything away. A man who chose to live in exile, totally consumed by paranoia and hate. How do you square that final, almost desperate thought with the life he actually lived? That's really the mystery at the heart of his entire story.
I mean, it is a fall from grace that's so dramatic it feels like something out of a play. He had the entire world in his hand, a symbol of American genius, and then he just threw it all away. To really get how this happened, we got to go all the way back to the beginning.
And Bobby Fischer, he was the literal definition of this word. Born in Chicago in 1943, his background was just as complex as his mind. His mother, a brilliant Jewish intellectual who could speak 7 languages. The identity of his father is still a bit of a mystery, but it's widely believed he was a Jewish physicist. So from the very start, he was surrounded by this incredible intellect. But his own was about to eclipse everyone around him.
And it all started in this almost mythical way. He's 6 years old, his family had just moved to Brooklyn, and his sister buys him this cheap plastic chess set. He teaches himself the rules from the little instruction booklet in the box and becomes instantly, completely obsessed. He'd play against himself for hours on end, which, worried his mom so much she actually took him to a psychiatrist. The doctor's advice was pretty simple. Look, there are way worse things a kid could be obsessed with.
187. That was Fischer's estimated IQ, putting him right up there with some of history's greatest geniuses. But this incredible intelligence was like a laser, focused on one thing and one thing only, those 64 squares on a chessboard. For him, school wasn't a challenge. It was just a distraction, a total waste of time from his real calling. I mean, his rise wasn't just fast, it was a total blur. At 13, he plays what is still called the game of the century, just a stunning masterpiece of creativity. By 14, he's the U.S. champion, no question. By 15, he becomes the youngest grandmaster in history. And then at 16, he makes his choice crystal clear. He drops out of high school, basically declaring that anything that wasn't chess was just getting in his way. And he was gonna get his shot. So that brings us to 1972. Reykjavik, Iceland, a battle that was about so much more than just a title. This was the absolute peak of his power, but it was also the event that would set off his spectacular, decades-long collapse.
You really have to get the context here. The Soviet Union had completely dominated world chess since World War II. Their champions were these state-sponsored heroes, held up as proof that the communist system was superior. And then you've got this lone, eccentric American kid from Brooklyn, a self-taught genius, ready to take them all on by himself. It was literally the Cold War boiled down to a single chessboard.
But that same mind, the one that could see dozens of moves ahead on the board, it also saw conspiracies everywhere else. He was absolutely convinced the Soviets were cheating, that they were deliberately drawing games with each other just to save their energy to beat him. This paranoia, this belief that these powerful forces were all lined up against him, would become a defining feature of his life.
Yeah, he basically weaponized his eccentricity to get control. He made this series of just increasingly bizarre demands. The lighting had to be perfect, the cameras had to go. He even forfeited the second game of the match just to protest the conditions. It took a phone call from Henry Kissinger, of all people, and a British millionaire doubling the prize money just to get him back to the table. He had to control the entire environment, not just the pieces on the board.
Now, just to get a shot at the champion, Boris Spassky, Fischer had to get past 2 other top grandmasters, and he beat them both 6-0. Not a single loss, not one draw. In the world of elite chess, this had never happened before. It was thought to be impossible. It was such a show of brutal dominance that it just stunned the entire world. He wasn't just winning, he was absolutely demolishing the competition.
After a super dramatic series of games, he did it. He won. Bobby Fischer was the world chess champion. He broke the Soviet machine. He comes home, he's a national hero, a celebrity, a millionaire. He's on the cover of magazines, he's offered millions in endorsements, and then, poof, he just vanished. For 20 years, he lived in total seclusion, turning down every offer,
cutting himself off from the very world that had just celebrated him. So for 2 decades, silence. Then, in 1992, something shocking happened. Fischer announced he was coming back for a rematch against his old rival Spassky. But the place where this match was held would turn him from an eccentric recluse into an international fugitive. See, the match was set to be held in Yugoslavia, which was under really strict US and UN sanctions because of the war going on there. The U.S. Treasury Department sent Fischer an official letter warning him in no uncertain terms that playing in the match and taking prize money was a criminal act, and it was punishable by a huge fine and 10 years in prison.
So at the press conference for the match, Fischer holds up the letter from the U.S. government so all the cameras can see it. He calls it a threat. And then, in this just shocking moment of pure defiance, he spits on it. Right there. With that one act, he cut his ties with his home country forever. He chose to become an outlaw.
He actually won that rematch, took home $3 million, but he could never go home again. For the next decade, he just lived like a nomad, wandering through Hungary and Asia as his paranoia and his hatred just got worse and worse. He gave these bizarre radio interviews filled with horrible, anti-American and deeply anti-Semitic rants, which was a shocking, dark turn for a man of Jewish heritage. His life on the run finally ended in 2004 when he got arrested in Japan. But, in a final ironic twist, he was saved by an unlikely place, Iceland, the very site of his greatest victory, granted him citizenship and gave him a final home.
He ended up dying in Iceland back in 2008 from kidney failure, and he left behind this legacy it's almost impossible to untangle. He was a hero who became a pariah, a genius who fell victim to what many people think was a severe mental illness.
You know, even in his darkest, most isolated years, that part of him that just loved the pure art of the game, it never really died. He started to hate modern chess, thought it was being killed by players just memorizing openings, so he invented a new version, Fischer Random Chess. By mixing up the starting pieces every single game, he forced players to rely on pure creativity, not on memory. It was his last great gift to the game he completely revolutionized.
So how are we supposed to remember this guy? As the unparalleled genius who could see things on a chessboard that nobody else could? As the troubled, hateful outcast who just spewed venom and pushed everyone away? Or as the enduring innovator who, even at his worst, was trying to protect the beauty of the game he loved? The truth is, of course, he was all three.
In the end, there are just no easy answers here. Was he a tragic hero, crushed by the pressure of the Cold War and his own mind? Was he a villain, whose hateful ideas completely overshadow his brilliance? Or was he just a casualty, a man whose mind was both his greatest gift and his most inescapable prison? The debate still goes on, and his story is still one of the most compelling and cautionary tales of the last century.